Okay, today my talk is a more general one, and I'll cover some aspects of the gastrointestinal cancers as well. We want to discuss and have an understanding of what cancer is, because understanding what cancer is can help us prevent cancer. Why do we talk about cancer? The simple reason, cancer is now the #1 killer in Singapore, okay? But the good news is that a lot of cancers can actually be prevented if you lead the correct lifestyle, do the correct things to prevent cancer from forming or to catch it at an early phase. Look at this chart. Causes of death in Singapore. 37% of our deaths in Singapore is caused by cancer. In the old days, this chart is very, very different. You see things like infectious diseases, pneumonia, tuberculosis causing death. Now, in fact, in maternal mortality, women die in childbirth, children die when they're young because of infections and all sorts of things. But now, as medical science improves, we're living longer and longer and longer, and we're dying of diseases that are related to older age. So the two big things, cardiovascular disease and cancer. In fact, 1 in 3 of Singaporeans or people living in Singapore may get cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 4 will die of this cancer. The cause of death will be cancer. That's quite a frightening statistic, right? 1 in 3 in this room, right? You look to your left, to your right, that's 3 of you. 1 of you might get cancer in your lifetime, okay? But the good news is that you do not want to be that 1 in 3. You want to be the 2 in 3, right? And 40% of cancers can actually be prevented, preventable, okay? Let's see. This is interesting. This is the latest data we have that's published by our national database up to 2015. Colon cancer is now, this is the top 10 cancers in males. And colon cancer is now the #1 cancer in males. They take up 17% of all the cancer cases in males. Lung cancer used to be #1, but now it's become #2. Stomach cancer used to be very, very top of the list many years ago, about 30, 40 years ago. It used to be #1 or #2, but now it's fallen down the ranking. So for males, colon cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer are the ones that you should pay attention to. Okay, next. For females, breast is still the top cancer by far. Okay, followed by colon cancer, lung cancer, and then some of the female cancers are here. Okay, next. Okay, we start off from the beginning. You always hear cancer, tumor, malignancy, neoplasm. What do we actually mean by that? Sometimes we tell a patient, or their relatives, the bad news is that, oh, your father has stomach cancer, and they say, stomach cancer, is it malignant? Okay, that shows that a lot of people don't understand these terms at all. Malignancy and cancer is the same. Okay, tumor may or may not be cancerous. Okay, so tumor, when we say a tumor, to doctors, tumor is also the same as what we call a neoplasia. Neoplasia is a Latin word that means new growth. So tumor is any abnormal mass of tissue. Okay, so if you have normal cells like this, if they form an abnormal growth of tissues, it's called a tumor. A tumor can be benign or it can be malignant. Benign, meaning that it's non-cancerous. Malignant means it's cancerous. Okay? Some tumors are benign, but they have the potential to become malignant in the future. So these are what we call pre-cancerous tumors. If you look at this difference between a benign tumor and a malignant tumor, you look at the cells. The cells in the malignant tumor, the cancerous tumor, are aggressive looking. They are, they don't look like normal cells. Whereas benign tumors, the cells, The abnormal cells look pretty much like the normal cells, except that they grow and form a mass. If you look at cancer cells, they are aggressive. They tend to invade, and they have this ugly appearance. Okay, so the definition of cancer is that it's abnormal cell growth which have the potential to invade and spread to other parts of the body. So abnormal cells forming a lump, which may be a benign tumor, or sometimes what we call a cancer in situ, which is a very, very early cancer change, in just the tumor itself. But when it starts to invade into the deeper layers, then it becomes what we call invasive cancer. When it invades into the deeper layers, they have the potential to enter the bloodstream, the lymphatic system, and then spread to the rest of the body. That's why cancer is so deadly, because it continues to grow in the spot. It also disperses the cancer cells to other parts of the body, and that leads to disseminated cancer. So what causes cancer? At the very basic level, all cancers involve change in your genes, okay? Because of a change in your gene, called a mutation in the gene, the cells become abnormal. Look at all these normal genes you have. Suddenly, something happens, the gene becomes mutated, it becomes aggressive. Okay, so at the basic level, all cancers are caused by abnormalities in the gene. So revision for those who have who studied science in your younger days. This is your cell. Okay, your cell has a nucleus, which is like the center, the control center of the cell. And in the nucleus are the chromosomes, which contain the genetic material. The chromosomes are made up of genes, which is made up of a chemical called the DNA, which is this spiral chemical. DNA are made up of 4 different kinds of bases, nucleosides. So they form pairs: guanine, cytosine, adenine, thymine. So just 4 different types of bases forming pairs like this code for all your genetic information that you have in your body. Okay, so from a very, very simple thing, it can code very, very complex genetic information in the body. This gene, this is the nucleus of the cell. Imagine this is the nucleus. The genetic material is contained in the nucleus. The genetic material produces a messenger. So a DNA produces a messenger RNA, and the messenger goes to the factories in the cell itself to form proteins. Okay, and these proteins are the things that control all the cellular processes in your body. Okay, so the genes produces proteins in the end. If you have a mutation in the gene, that might lead to a coding problem, which lead to an abnormal protein. So the cells become different. Okay, they start to become either weaker or they become stronger. If you look at DNA mutations, imagine this guy, right? Okay, next. This is the code. This is the base pairs which form the DNA. Imagine a mutation is just a change in one letter. Okay, that may result in an abnormal gene. So that cell, so you imagine all the cells in the body which are normal. One cell undergoes a mutation. The gene becomes abnormal. It may become silent. It may die. Okay, because it's coding the wrong information. But on the other hand, if it's coding the wrong information, some may cause disease because they produce abnormal changes in the body. So from a simple mutation like this, for example, Mr. B's, this is what he's coding, right? His letters are coding B's. If you get a substitution in one of the letters, you get wrong information. If you get a deletion of one of the letters, you get wrong information, right? From B's becomes a feast to becomes a best, or becomes a breast if you insert just one wrong base. Or if you inverse one wrong base, it becomes wrong again. So delicate is our genetic material, right? That you just change one little fella, you can get a totally abnormal thing. But But in addition to mutations, we also have other sorts of mutations and rearrangements in the gene that can cause abnormal information. We don't have to go through all this, just to highlight to you that many, many different things can take place. And this can lead to this fella having an abnormal mutant gene can lead to weaker cells, or it can lead to stronger cells. The weaker mutants are eliminated from the body because they are, they are abnormal. They don't function as well. But then again, some mutants become super mutants. They become stronger than the normal cells, and they start to grow and grow and grow, and they don't stop growing. Normal cells, they grow and then they stop growing. Okay, but mutant cells continue to grow, continue to invade the body. So these super mutants are what we call cancers. Okay. That's a quite simple explanation of what a cancer is. This slide shows how cancers start. That although cancers start as changes in genes, they have to reach a threshold effect before they become a cancer. Okay? What do we mean by a threshold effect? So during cell growth, when the cells are actively growing, especially certain areas in our body, the cell grows a lot, like inside the intestine and all this, the lining of the intestine, the cells are growing all the time, replicating themselves all the time. So during this cell growth and cell multiplication and cell DNA replication, a mutation may occur in the genetic code, but these mutations are usually auto-corrected by the body. The cells, our cells have DNA repair mechanisms which auto-correct all these things. So they are either, these abnormal genes are either deleted or they are corrected by the body. But sometimes, either the cell accumulates too many mutations or our cell cycle regulation, our auto-correct mechanism is damaged. Then these abnormal DNA changes, these abnormal mutations may reach a threshold development, that causes tumor development. Okay, that's why if you think of how complex our body is, not everybody get cancers all over the place, sprouting all over the body, because our body is quite resilient. If your body is healthy, we can delete all these abnormal cells. It's only when our body is weak or we accumulate too many poisons that you reach this threshold that the cells become cancer. So, in addition to all these genetic abnormalities, there are also some epigenetic abnormalities, which I don't need to discuss too long, but just to let you know that it is all a very complex system that eventually leads to something we call cancer. So, let's take the example of colorectal cancer, because that's a #1 cancer for males and #2 cancer for females. So important that I want to use it to illustrate. Look at this intestine, 你的肠啊. Okay, the inner lining is the place where colon cancer start. Okay, it always starts in the inner lining of the colon. Why? Because the inner lining is the one that's exposed to all the toxins that you eat and all that, right? So the inner lining, the cells are the ones that are damaged the most, they replicate the most. Even as you're sitting here, the cells are growing, replacing themselves. And when cells are replacing and growing all the time, that's when genetic accidents can happen. Okay? So imagine this. Cells, some genetic accident has happened and you form a little mass of cells, which is a tumor, but it's benign, what we call a polyp. A polyp is like a fleshy growth. Chinese, right, we say 息肉, okay, a small resting cell, which is actually not dangerous. But as the polyp undergoes more and more mutations and more changes, then it becomes cancerous, it starts to invade and starts to go into the bloodstream and starts to spread. Okay, so this is a polyp, it's not cancerous, it becomes an early cancer. Cancer spread to lymph nodes, becomes bigger, invade into the wall of the colon, then it spreads, becomes stage 4. So cancer, we usually say stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Stage 4 cancers are cancers that have spread beyond the primary. So the colon is the primary, it started here. And the lung and the liver, the spread is called the secondaries. Okay, so when you reach stage 4 cancer, it's very unlikely that you'll be cured. But stage 1 and stage 2 cancers can be cured if we find them early, if we do the appropriate treatment. This is a very important slide because it tells you what happens when you develop colon cancer. So normal lining of the colon, some accident happened in the cell, forms a polyp like this. From a polyp, if this polyp is not removed, it can undergo more and more changes. Look at this. All these are the genetic changes that have to take place. So not just one mutation. One mutation leads to an abnormal polyp, and then you get more and more mutations accumulating in that polyp. Then it becomes a cancer. This process from a polyp to become a cancer takes time. It takes about 5 to 10 years to change. Therefore, you can imagine your window of opportunity for you to prevent cancer by removing these polyps before they become cancerous, right? And yeah, what I was going to say is, when do these polyps in your colon start to form? They start to form when you're older. Usually around the age of 40, 50, they start to become more and more common. Why? Because, as you will realize, all these mutations that happen are usually accidents. Accidents in the genes. And as you know, accidents happen more and more commonly as you grow older and older, right? So as you grow older, you become weaker. You have more accidents like falls and all that. So accidents in the gene, in the DNA, also occur as you grow older and older because our genes become more and more fragile. Okay. Therefore, cancers usually happen in the older people. Correct? Okay, now let's see. When that colon cancer develops, invades the bloodstream, the lymphatic system, it is circulated around the circulatory system, and it goes to the liver, the lungs, the brains, and all that. And this is advanced stage 4 cancer, which we don't want to happen. Now, although we said that most cancers happen from accidents in the gene, there are some cancers that are due to an inherited abnormal gene that you have. In other words, if your father had cancer at a very young age, he may have an abnormal gene that he's in his genetic information that he could pass on to you. And these are what we call hereditary cancers. So for colon cancer, if you look at all the colon cancers, only about 10% of colon cancers are due to inherited genes. The rest of colon cancers are actually not due to an inherited gene. It's due to an accident in the genetic information. In other words, you were born with healthy genes, but along the way, some accident happened in your genetic material. Understand? Okay? So about 70% of colon cancers are what we call sporadic, no reason. Okay? For no reason, you get a colon cancer. There are some 20% what we call familial. Familial means it runs in the family, but there is no identifiable cancer gene. Why it runs in the family? Okay, I'm going to talk about that later. But look at this, the lifetime colon cancer risk. All of us sitting in the room here, the risk of us getting colon cancer is about 5 to 10%. That means 1 in 10 of us to 1 in 20 of us may get colon cancer, even though we have no family history of colon cancer at all. But there are up to 20% of people, there are some people who may get what we call familial. In other words, it runs in the family, so you have a higher risk of getting a colon cancer. Your risk would be about 20% or so, lifetime risk of getting colon cancer. But some people, they have inherited cancer genes, like Lynch syndrome or polyposis genes. The risk of getting colon cancer is almost 80 to 100%. Okay? So, repeat, sporadic cancers are due to changes in the genes. Now, we said just now, all cancers actually arise from changes in the genes, but all these changes in the genes are not inherited. So these are what we call sporadic cancers. And it's due to acquired mutations in your gene during your lifetime. And the cause of this is multifactorial or unknown. And it could be an integration of many factors, your age, your lifestyle, the environment that you live in, the diet and all that. And these are some of the things we're going to talk about. So sporadic cancers, as you can understand, usually happen at the older age. Now, we talked about this before, right? The colon lining cells becoming a polyp to becoming a cancer. Why does this polyp form? Why does this cancer form? Sometimes it's due to accidents, but certain conditions can make these accidents happen with greater frequency. For example, if you eat a lot of red meat, if you eat a lot of processed meat, a lot of animal fat, these are all what we call pro-neoplastic factors or pro-cancer factors. So these are carcinogens. They are toxic to the lining. They cause more and more accidents to happen. Okay? And also, there are some which are protectors of the colon, what we call anti-neoplastic or anti-cancer factors. So fiber and all this, taking more and more fiber is known to have a protective effect on the colon, and they reduce your risk of getting cancers. When we talk about familial cancers, we said this before. In the general population, your lifetime risk of getting colon cancer is 5 to 10%. But of the people who have colon cancer, 20% of them may have a family history of colon cancer. So they can either be familial or hereditary. Familial meaning it runs in the families because you all live in the same household. You are all exposed to the same toxins. Like somebody smokes, or all of you smoke. All of you eat the same kind of unhealthy diet. So, although you may not have inherited a gene that causes cancer, all of you have an increased risk of getting cancer because of clustering of the risk factors. Okay, but there are some people who have inherited a cancer gene, and that constitutes only about 5 to 10% of colon cancer. You have inherited a gene mutation, and that leads to you having a higher risk of getting cancer. So we talk about hereditary cancers and non-hereditary. Non-hereditary cancers, you can see, it takes a number of mutations before you accumulate enough genetic injury to form a cancer cells. But if you have an inherited cancer family gene, you already have inherited these abnormal genes from young. So you're already carrying these abnormal genes. So by the time you get 1 or 2 more abnormal mutations, cancer can happen. So therefore, in cancer families, the cancers happen at a very young age. So colon cancer, they can get it at age 30s or 20s. Some even get it in the teenagers. They can even get colon cancers. So we talked about this. If in hereditary cancers, you have a much higher risk than the normal population of getting cancer. Usually it's a young onset, and you may have multiple cancers. That means you have a colon in the right side, colon cancer on the right side, then you get another colon cancer on the left side, or you may even get another breast cancer or stomach cancer, all at the same time, what we call synchronous, or one after another, what we call metachronous. You get a cancer here, you operate, you are cured, but a few years later you get a cancer somewhere else. Okay, so all these people with this kind of unusual cancers and multiple cancers, make us suspect that you may have inherited a cancer family gene. Okay. In colon cancers, there are 2 important genes that are related to cancer family. One is the Lynch syndrome, okay, which also some people call it the hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer. Okay. And the other one is what we call the familial adenomatous polyposis. This is quite rare, only less than 1%. All these genes have what we call autosomal dominant inheritance. In other words, if your father carries this gene, there is a 50% chance of him passing on his gene to the next generation. Okay? You understand this, right? No need to go through. But you can understand you inherited 1 gene from your father, 1 gene from your mother. So as long as you inherited one abnormal gene from your father, you become abnormal. But if you inherited the normal gene from your father who had the cancer gene, but he didn't pass it on to you, you may be totally normal. Okay, so this is what we call autosomal dominant. Now, if you have this gene, if you happen to inherit this gene called Lynch syndrome gene, your risk of getting colon cancer in your lifetime is 80%. Instead of 5 to 10%, it becomes 80%. In addition to that, you can also have the risk of getting other cancers like womb cancer, stomach cancer, ovarian cancer, and all these types of cancers. Another one, in the polyposis, polyposis syndrome, by the time you're in the teens, you get hundreds and thousands of polyps like this in your colon. And the average age of you getting colon cancer is very young. By the time you're 30s, 40s, you will get colon cancer, almost certain. You can also get cancers in other parts of the body, like your stomach, your small bowel, and other things. So your question is, you can get cancers because of accidental mutations. You can get cancers because you've inherited certain genes. Now, the more important thing, which is the second part of our talk, is how can you help yourself by preventing the cancers? So we talk about general things. Your genes, you cannot change, right? Because you've inherited the genes, you cannot change that. You cannot say, I'm go for a refund, change your genes to normal genes. You can't. Your age, you can't change. You grow older every day. Okay? But there are certain things that you can change, and modifying these things can actually help you reduce your risk of cancer. This slide, I'll talk a little bit longer. 2 things that you can do to prevent cancer: healthy living and preventive medicine. Healthy living, very simple. Do not smoke. Okay, smoking is probably the #1 cause of cancer. Smoking leads to lung cancer. It can also lead to other cancers like breast cancer, colon cancer, and all that. It increases the risk. Something that you do not know: healthy body weight. Obesity actually is the second most important risk factor of cancer. Unhealthy diet. A diet that, even though you may not be overweight, but you're taking a diet that is consuming a lot of carcinogens, a lot of unhealthy things. Alcohol is also a risk factor for cancer. Exposure to sun. That's more for Caucasians. If you're exposed a lot to sun, you're at the risk of getting skin cancers. And a sedentary lifestyle. Actually, sedentary lifestyle have been found to increase your risk of getting cancers. Okay, so these are the things you can simply change by acquiring a more healthy lifestyle. And I hope that every one of you, when you walk out today, you will start to effect some of these changes. So acquire a healthy lifestyle, but in addition to that, you should also do some preventive medicine. Preventive medicine, what do I mean? Go for vaccinations against cancers that are caused by infections. The 2 big ones, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, can cause liver cancer. Hepatitis C, unfortunately, you can't get vaccinated now, but hepatitis B, there's a very strong program in Singapore to prevent hepatitis B by vaccinations. Okay, and that will help you to reduce your risk of getting liver cancer. The other big one, cervical cancer, caused by the human papilloma virus. You might have read recently that the government is actually giving this vaccination free to all the young girls in Singapore. It's estimated, I heard it on BBC earlier this week when I was driving, that they estimated that in another 10 years, maybe cervical cancer will no longer be a big problem, or maybe even eradicated in a few decades' time, if everyone goes for vaccination against this virus that causes cervical cancer. Okay, so preventive medicine, something you can do. The other big thing that you can do for prevention is cancer screening. And later on, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Because if you have a lot of fat cells, that leads to changes in your estrogen levels, your insulin and growth factor levels. It causes constant inflammation in your cells. And all these things can increase your risk of getting cancers. Okay? So smoking, you know, right? But obesity is the next thing you should know. In fact, in America, it is estimated that in a few years' time, obesity is the #1 cause of cancer, no longer smoking. Because smoking is getting less frequent and obesity is increasing in frequency. In addition, you should also adopt a cancer preventive diet. I won't talk too much about diet because Caleb here, you're going to cover all that, right, Caleb? Yeah, he's going to talk all that. Caleb is very good. I listened to his talk before. He's going to talk more about diet and cancer, so I won't talk too much about that. But there are two big things that you can change. You should take more foods that can reduce your risk of getting cancer. And you should take less of the foods that increase your risk of getting cancer. These are what we call the dietary carcinogens. Example, processed meat, red meat. Okay? Examples of food that can reduce the risk of cancer: fibers, whole foods, whole grains, pulses, fruits, vegetables. So carcinogens, how to prove something is carcinogenic? You know, always when you give a talk, they will say, "Doc, I heard that eating too much of this thing can cause what cancer?" It's very, very hard to prove because, you know, to do these kind of studies, you really, really need a whole big population before you can prove that certain things causes certain cancers. So we don't really know, but we have some postulates of certain things that cause a cancer. So can diet prevent cancer? The answer is to a certain extent, yes. And these are some of the things that have been found to have a protective effect: carotenoids, folates, vitamin C, E, selenium, flavonoids, phytochemicals. But if you ask me whether you can, why don't we just take all these things as supplements? Can I be sure that I won't get cancer? You know, no studies have ever been able to prove, you know, that these nutrients, if you take them as supplements, you can absolutely prevent cancer. But it may be beneficial in a general way. Fiber is also very interesting because fiber itself reduces your risk of getting colon cancer, and that's quite well proven. These are some of the colorful vegetables and fruits that contain phytochemicals that are cancer preventive. Okay, for example, your red color things, your yellow color things contain all the flavonoids and all that. So go for the colorful fruits and vegetables, and you must eat the color. You don't just eat the inside of the fruit. Then you must eat the color, that means the skin or the whole fruit. Okay, then you can get the protective effect of all these anti-carcinogenic chemicals. How does fiber prevent colorectal cancer? One simple way is that it moves carcinogens out of the body. If you have a good fiber diet, the more regular your bowel habits are, the toxins that you accumulate in your system don't get jammed inside your colon for too long periods. Because you move your bowels every day, or twice a day. So these carcinogens have less time to react with the cells of the colon to cause a colon cancer. A very simple explanation. But in addition to that, the bacteria in your gut, what we call the microbiota, also interacts with the fiber to produce chemicals that help to prevent colon cancer. Some of these chemicals include this thing called butyrate. And it's recommended that you should take at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day to have an effect of cancer prevention for colon cancer. This is how butyrate protects you against cancer. It helps to provide butyrate is a kind of a short-chain fatty acid that helps to provide energy to the lining of your colon. And if you have butyrate, which is produced by the fiber, that helps to suppress inflammation, it helps in the gut immunoregulation, and it helps to improve the gut barrier, which is important for maintaining good gut health. We now believe that the bacteria in your gut, and the lining of the gut is very important to maintaining good gut health. And gut health actually controls a lot of the processes in your body, including things like cancer, including things like obesity, mental health, and all that. A lot of us believe that your gut microbiota, your gut barrier has a very important role. Oh, this came out in the papers, not papers, online, I think last week or so. This lady is my patient, and they interviewed her because this article featured on why younger people are getting more and more cancers, including bowel cancer and colon cancer. She was very brave. She came out with her story of how she had stomach cancer, quite advanced stomach cancer, even when she was quite a young age. She was 41 when she had that cancer. But the important thing I want to highlight was that we now feel that why people are getting more and more, younger people are getting more cancers, is the fact that one of the things is that we are taking more and more antibiotics. And antibiotics actually destroy the gut microbiota. And this can, abnormality in the gut microbiota can increase your risk of getting stomach cancers, colon cancers. Okay? Okay, this one, quite easy to understand. Processed meat, red meat, they contain all these carcinogens that increase your risk of getting colon cancer. I won't go through too much because I think Caleb is going to talk about this. Yeah. Okay, this one also won't talk. Okay, fat also causes cancer. So you take a lot of animal fat, that also increases your risk of cancer because they form free radicals that damage the DNA, especially saturated fats, trans fats. Okay? I will skip that also. Next. Alcohol. Okay, alcohol is considered a group 1 carcinogen. That means it's a definite link with certain cancers. Therefore, you should limit your daily consumption. No need to eliminate completely. You can still enjoy a little bit, but limit your daily consumption. But if you smoke and drink, that's worse. So you get the risk of smoking, you get the risk of alcohol, plus the two acting together is synergistic. Okay? Synergistic means each one help each other to produce more cancers. So if you smoke, don't drink. If you drink, don't smoke. Okay, choose one vice. Okay, and all these multiple effects of alcohol that causes cancer. I won't go through too much again. See, these are the cancers that are related to alcohol intake: mouth cancer, pharyngeal cancer, larynx cancer, voice box cancer, esophageal cancer, breast cancer, liver, pancreas, bowel. Okay. I won't talk about these too much, except there are a lot of food controversies. You can probably read them here and there, hearsay here and there. These are some of the things that increase the risk of, in foods, that increase the risk of getting cancer. Okay, sweeteners, pesticides in your foods and all that. That's why people try not to take too much processed foods. They take more organic, they don't have pesticides and all that. It's true. And these are the things that help to prevent cancer. Green tea especially, soy, tomatoes, superfoods, and certain vitamins and minerals. Okay, I won't talk about that. I think Caleb is going to cover this. Okay, now we talk about a little bit more about colon cancer. Am I running out of time? 10 more minutes. Okay, I think I can. Can colon cancer be prevented? I think if you have not been sleeping and you're listening carefully, almost all colon cancers start as polyps. 90% of colon cancers start as polyps. If you remove these polyps, can you prevent cancer, colon cancer? The answer is yes. So you can prevent 90% of colon cancers if you remove these polyps before they become cancerous. 10% of colon cancers don't start as polyps, they start as a cancer straight away. So still not 100%, but 90%, is quite good, right? We talk about this. So intervention at this point in time, doing something to remove this, can actually prevent colon cancers. And the best way to check the colon, there are many ways of doing colon cancer screening. You can do a stool test, you can do an X-ray, you can do a scope. But actually, the best way, to me, and the only way, is to do a colonoscopy. Put in a scope. What we do is we put the scope in, we pass it all the way around the colon to check for polyps and cancers. Cancers we rarely find, right? Because by chance you might find a cancer if you do a colonoscopy for screening. But very frequently, up to maybe about 20–30% of patients, we may find polyps. If we find a polyp during a colonoscopy, we remove the polyp straight away. Okay? And once you have your colon cleaned out of polyps, you have a 5-year guarantee, right? Because we said it takes about 5 to 10 years for another polyp to form to become cancer. So not bad. 90% 5-year guarantee, right? To prevent you from getting the #1 cancer in Singapore. That's why I'm spending my Saturday afternoon here, because I hope to save some lives by talking to you. Hopefully you go and do some screening, check your colon and remove these polyps. So the aim of colon cancer screening is not just to detect colon cancer at the early stage or curable stage. It's the protective effect you have. You actually can prevent cancer for the next 5 years by detecting and removing these pre-cancer polyps. This is a polyp. If you remove this, you go home and then that's it. You don't even think about it, but you actually have prevented this from becoming something big like this, which is a cancerous polyp. Now, this cancerous polyp, if you don't remove it in time, if you remove it in time, it can still cure you. But if you don't remove it in time, it will invade and you will spread and become advanced cancer. So colon cancer is actually the most preventable type of cancer. We talked about this. Your lifetime risk, my lifetime risk of getting colon cancer is 10%. The risk starts at age 40 and rises sharply after age 50. Why? Because as we grow older, these genetic accident mutations become more and more frequent. Therefore, you should start screening yourself when? 50, right? Okay? If you have a relative with colon cancer, gastric cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, your risk of getting colon cancer also increases greatly. Because, we talked about that, either you may have either a hereditary cancer gene or you may be familial clustering of risk factors. So, if you have a relative with this type of cancer, you should start screening earlier. Therefore, our ministry recommends average risk start from age of 50. Okay, every 5 years, do one check. If you are a high risk family history, you start from age of 40 or 10 years younger than the age of your relative with cancer. Imagine your brother had colon cancer at age 40. That means his polyp started forming at age 30, right? Therefore, you should start screening not at age 40 or 50, but 30. 10 years younger than the close relative that you have with cancer, okay? Recently, last year, the American Cancer Society recommended in their guidelines to actually start colon cancer screening earlier. So instead of 50, 45 now they are recommending. And I think in Singapore, we should be recommending 45 now. In this room, I think a lot of us already qualify 45, except Dr. Jandana. Okay, we talked about that just now. Colon cancers and stomach cancers are getting younger and younger all over the world because of multiple factors. We don't really know why. 5 minutes left. Okay. But 45 is now the new recommendation. Okay? So we do a thing called colonoscopy. That's the best way of screening. Just takes 20 minutes to do the scope. If we find a polyp, we remove it at the same time. It's a day surgery procedure. You don't have to stay at hospital. Just come, do the scope, go home, and you're protected for the next 5 years. Okay, 20 minutes to protect for 5 years. I think it's worthwhile. We spent a few more minutes on gastric cancer. Gastric cancer, 30, 40 years ago, the incidence was so high, but now it's drop. Okay, it's still dropping all the time. Why? Because we smoke less now. These are the risk factors for stomach cancer. We smoke less now, and our diet has improved. These are the things that cause stomach cancer. As you grow older, if you're male, if you're Chinese, if you have a family history, these are your inherent risks. If you smoke, if you eat a diet that has a lot of salted products, like kiam he, kiam cai and all that, preserved foods, canned foods, all these have chemicals called nitrosamines and nitrates that are actually carcinogenic. In the old days when we don't have refrigerators in Singapore, you eat a lot of these things, preserved foods and all that. And actually, the impact of refrigeration, we've studied it, and that's one of the major causes of why stomach cancer has now dropped in incidence. Because we have refrigerators, you can buy fresh food, you can keep in the fridge, and they remain good in good quality. So the incidence of stomach cancer has dropped. One big factor that causes stomach cancer also is Helicobacter. Helicobacter is a bacteria that stays in the stomach, that lives in the stomach, and is very common in Asia. Why? It's not common in the West. And that's why in the Westerners, Caucasians, they don't get stomach cancer. Stomach cancer is an Asian disease. And we get it because we have this bacteria and we pass this bacteria around. If we share food, if you eat unhygienically prepared food, you may contract you may get a Helicobacter infection in the stomach. And I'll skip all this. And the Helicobacter causes the Helicobacter causes a change in the stomach that leads to stomach cancer. We won't talk too much about that, except that if Helicobacter can cause stomach cancer, can we prevent stomach cancer by eradicating Helicobacter? And the answer is yes. You can do this style of studies in China, where they take a lot of people. You can do this because you can pay them to do this. So you pay them $400 to come for a scope. Those that have Helicobacter, half you treat, half you don't treat. And then every 5 years you scope them again. You pay them some money, you scope them. And they found that those that have Helicobacter and they don't treat have a higher risk of getting stomach cancer compared to those they have treated and eliminated the Helicobacter. So you want to be in that group. You want to find out whether you have Helicobacter. If you have it, you should get it eradicated to reduce your risk of getting stomach cancer. So I won't talk about this, no time. Okay, talk a little bit more, the last part of the talk, about hereditary cancers. We had this slide just now. 10% of colon cancers are due to inherited genes. Now, if you tell me, Doc, you know, my brother had colon cancer, my sister had colon cancer, my cousin had colon cancer, my auntie had breast cancer, another 2 aunties had stomach cancer. You know, I'm so worried. You know, have I inherited this gene that is a time bomb in me? Can I test for this? The answer is yes. Okay? Now we can actually do a gene test. If you have a very significant pattern of cancers in your family, and you want to find out whether you've inherited this gene, you might not, right? You might be the lucky 50% that did not inherit from your parents. Okay? So if you want to test whether you have this gene, can you do it? The answer now is yes. If you asked me this question 15 years ago, the answer is yes, but it will cost you $10 million to do this test. And it's true, 10 to 15 years ago, it will cost you $10 million to $1 million to do this test. But now, you can actually do this test for a very reasonable price, a genomic test, to see whether you carry this cancer family gene. The reason why we can do it is that we have now this magnificent machine, which is called a high-throughput DNA sequencing machine. It's really revolutionized the way we can screen for genetic cancers, genetic-related cancers. So in the old days, right, you want to find a particular word in the encyclopedia. Imagine this is your DNA, right? You want to find the word colorectal cancer in your gene. You got to read from page 1 to page to know what. How long will it take you to read through all this gene? That's why it cost so much in the old days, $1 million. Time's up, okay. But now we have Google, okay? So by Googling, we can actually pick up certain words we want to find out. So we instead of reading the whole encyclopedia, we Google for colon cancer and stomach cancer. And almost instantly, you can find the answer. And the answer is yes. For example, in colon cancers, we know these are the genes. We can Google the gene and see whether you have it or not. We don't have to read your whole DNA. We are just Googling your gene. If you have breast cancer in your family, we Google for these genes. You will have pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer in your family, we can Google for all these different genes. If you don't know what gene we're looking for, we can do a Pau Kaleo test. Google for everything that we know of. How much will it cost you? Last year I gave this talk and I said $5,000. This year I give this talk, I said $4,000. So not that expensive, you know, $4,000. It's a blood test. We send the blood somewhere to a lab. They compare it to all the genetic information that they have, and within 2 to 3 weeks, we can give you the information whether you carry the gene. What is the advantage of knowing whether you have the gene or not? Some patients get very worried. They say, "Oh, doc, I think I better not go for this test. I will know that I have a time bomb in my body. You know, I carry this gene. I cannot live with it. Every day I'll think about it." Correct? But my answer is that if you have a time bomb, you want to know where the time bomb is, right? You want to know where a time bomb is in the breast, or it's in the ovary, or it's in the stomach, or the colon. So we can target, we can tell you exactly with this gene which cancer you're going to get or likely to get, and then we will do intensive checks. For example, Angelina Jolie, I think you might have heard a number of years ago, she found out that she had this BRCA gene, and she knows that the time bomb is in the breast and the ovary. She did the right thing. She removed both her breasts, removed her ovaries. Right? Correct? So these are some of the preventive things we can do now with genetic testing. Okay, this is the end of the question of my talk. I hope that gives you a good introduction to what cancer is, understanding what cancer is, and how you can actually change your lifestyle, change your diet, reduce your intake of exposure to carcinogens like smoking, alcohol, obesity, and go for preventive medicine to reduce your risk of getting all these common cancers.